guys. Yeah, thank you. That's a lovely intro. Cool, guys. So I've got about 15 minutes and there's a ton of stuff that I can cover. So I'm going to rip through it. And if you can't hear me down the back, I'll try and talk up because I sometimes can talk a little bit softly. So, just having a little bit of clicker issues. Here we go. Sorry, can someone click to the... Don't you love it when you work for a tech company and your tech doesn't work? It's the best thing in the world. This happens to me in the office all the time. Hey, here we go. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I'm going to spend about 15 minutes talking here about the mobile path to purchase and how we sort of see at Facebook and Instagram the trends evolving and about how you can use mobile increasingly not only to drive e-commerce and m-commerce, but also to kind of touch your consumers and shoppers as close as you possibly can at shelf. So this is me. This is my Facebook profile. I love to travel. This is my little sausage dog called Frankie, Frankenstein, because he's an absolute menace. And I work specifically in the FMCG vertical across Facebook and Instagram. But before I came to Facebook about a year ago now, I worked at P&G for about 5 years, and majority of that was actually in shopper marketing, working across a variety of different channels. So working in shopper marketing for Coles, for Woolworths, and then a brief spell at Target. And now in terms of the clients that I look after today, when I look across the brands and across the channels that I've worked across, what it really and what I've sort of noticed when I had a look back at this is essentially in terms of what I know and what kind of our experiences are now with Facebook, we touch a ton of different channels. And I think what's interesting about that now is it doesn't necessarily matter actually what channel that you're in, because the conversation has moved not from supers to mass to pharmacy and how you're going to drive share from one of those. And it's moved beyond whether you're going to move, move volume from offline to online. Actually, the conversations and the best conversations that we're having right now about how do you move and actually adapt to where shoppers are shopping right now, which is absolutely everywhere. So a multi-channel approach is absolutely critical. And the reason why a multi-channel approach is absolutely critical is because it's pretty tough out there. Now, this is an FMCG perspective, but it holds true pretty much across all industries. From a macroeconomic perspective, especially in Australia, kind of the Australian peso at the moment in terms of where the FX rate is, it's tough. In terms of retailer power, we've got one of the most concentrated retail markets in the entire world. And then from a market disruption, with the rise of digital marketing and media, and it's so much easier to get into the market, so you have a lot of disruptors who are coming through. And then also in terms of change in demand and change of the way that consumers are behaving, people want things. People are always on. They have their mobiles in their hand all the time. And so the expectation is, as brands, as marketers, that we're also always on. So there's a complete also shift in the way that consumers are behaving. So when we look across the market and people who are doing it best and really preparing for this next level of growth, what we see is the fact that those who are really preparing themselves and setting themselves up for future profitable sales is those who are really focusing on the road ahead as being multi-channel. And the reason we say that, if I have a quick look at the numbers, and I know this is late at night and everyone's got a beer in hand, so hopefully you don't mind me running through some stats. 50% of FMCG growth by 2018 is tipped to come from online. But that's not the only place where digital impacts people along the path to purchase. Actually, 50% of sales are said to be influenced by digital. And actually, multi-channel shoppers are worth a ton more. So actually 30 to 70% more is the uplift that's attributed to people who shop across your different ways that you can provide ways to buy your product. And this is actually even more prevalent in Australia, where Australian shoppers, second only to the US, are actually some of the most digitally influenced shoppers in the entire world. So, with all that set up in mind, I've got 3 things to talk to you about and 3 trends that I would recommend that you guys kind of think about when you're building your strategies moving forward. The first is that mobile is absolutely a consumer mindset. It's no longer behaviour, it's a mindset. So what you can see on the screen here is actually media consumption from 2010 compared to 2014. And what you'll actually notice in terms of the way that and what's changing and what's growing is that digital, this is kind of not new news to anyone in the room here, But that, in terms of how that has changed, particularly from a mobile angle from 4 years ago, is where it gets really interesting. So actually 4 years ago, people were spending about 20 minutes on mobile on average. Today, it's 3 hours a day. If you think about how close your mobile phone is on you right now and how stressful it is when you leave it at home, that decision of whether you'd go home and get it or come back for your meeting, I think most people would actually go home and get it, and that's what we find. So in terms of what we say, and the first kind of trend to be really aware of is the world isn't going mobile, it is mobile, and you need to be aware of that and planning for it. Now, the second sort of thing is I'm saying that people are spending 3 hours on their mobile every single day, what the hell are they doing? What are we doing? So if you think about your own habits, what we say is that they're apping, not yapping. So if you think about what you've done today and why you've spent the majority of your time when you've got your mobile phone out, it probably hasn't been on calls, or it might have been. Majority of it has been maybe in your Messenger app. It's been on Facebook and it's been on Instagram. In fact, 1 in 5 minutes, these are US kind of stats that you're seeing on the screen here in terms of this graph, but 1 in 5 minutes is spent on Facebook and Instagram in the US. In Australia, that actually comes down to 1:3. So when you're thinking about mobile usage, as you can see, that is absolutely skyrocketing and it's such a pivotal channel. And when you're thinking about mobile, you need to be thinking about Facebook and Instagram because that's where people are spending their time. So that's number one. Mobile is a consumer mindset. But number two is mobile is another aisle. And the best people and the best marketers and brands that we're seeing using mobile out there are thinking about mobile in two ways. The first is that they're thinking about it as actually another channel. So it's literally another aisle. It's moving from e-commerce to m-commerce. So that's kind of the jump. The other way that they're using it is to get as close to people as possible when they're making the ultimate decisions, which is choosing to pick your product off a shelf or choosing to kind of pick your particular service over someone else's. So in terms of that, and sort of talking to m-commerce first, 64% of people reduce the number, want to go to the store less. And 61% also, I'm struggling to see my stats here on the slides, but generally here, you can see here, 58% want to have more products delivered to their home. All of these stats combined together are saying the fact that people are after convenience. People want something that can be delivered to them easily. They don't actually necessarily, people will still go to store, and I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon, but people want options, and people need multi-channel delivery. And the reason that this is actually so important, and again I'm talking from an FMCG perspective, is because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So looking across, and these are US companies here, but you've already started to see the move in Australia, where we've got a number of disruptors who are coming into the market and are pretty much taking the knees out of big businesses who haven't developed an m-commerce or an e-commerce strategy. Unilever, in August, guts cut out of their share price purely because they didn't have an e-commerce strategy. And that's, again, coming back to the fact that Unilever's not doing it, so someone else will. So if you look at Dollar Shave Club, if you look at Birchbox, which is the same as Bellbox here, Club W, which is a wine provider, and then NatureBox, again, these same kinds of delivery mechanisms like Eat Fit Kitchen and those kind of ones that we see coming up here. It's imperative to have an m-commerce or an e-commerce strategy. It's only going to get bigger, and if you don't do it, someone else will. But not only is mobile along the path to purchase as another aisle, not only from an actual being able to purchase something, it's also critically important, as I said, for being able to influence at the ultimate moment of truth. And so this is probably the best example, and it's an oldie but a goodie, of how Facebook can actually help to influence people right when they're in the store. So I might just get, if you can start to play that video for me now, that would be fab. So that's the second, the mobile as another aisle. And the third is that the path to purchase is multi-channel. So I kept saying this and I'll keep saying it. The path to purchase no longer is a completely, it's not linear. You don't look for something and then buy it on one device. You look at it, you search for it, you find it on Facebook, you go into store, you look at it, and maybe they might not have your size, and you'll go home and you might buy it on your desktop computer. And so in regards to how we're seeing that the path to purchase evolves, it's complex, and it's so important to make sure that you're consistent across each of the different touch points where your consumer's going to see you. Because brands and people don't actually see channels, they see brands and they see those same messages consistently. And so that's why it's really important when you're actually looking then at how you measure conversions, is to make sure that you're partnering with platforms such as Facebook and Instagram who actually can measure across devices for you and work back to real identity and to people, not to proxies. So this is this last piece here, is that you need to be looking for partners and developing strategies that drive discovery and help you to measure real results in a multi-channel world. So I've talked a lot. I've probably gone over 15 minutes. If you remember 3 things from what I've said, it's first is to invest in where your consumers are. Invest in mobile. 2 is to understand and champion how it can work both online and offline for you. And the 3rd is to design for a multi-channel environment, because if you don't, someone else will. If you've got any other questions, Facebook for Business as well, you can come and find me afterwards, but Facebook for Business is also your go-to or your Facebook rep. Thank you.